Welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul Di Rienzzo. We got a great show in store for you. We're going to talk about some heavy history, and I love heavy history. I'm a heavy history hitter, and we're going to talk about some heavy history today. We were just talking about heavy history. We were talking about Rick Hoover and the Navy and the military history of the Cold War. We're fascinated by that, and we're going to actually go before that. We're going to tell you stories you never heard about the big one, World War II, and you might not know some of the things you're going to hear now, and I sure didn't know them until I met our guest, who really enlightened me and is working on a documentary, and we're sort of trying to get people out there to get the idea that this is a cool documentary idea, and maybe even get in touch with us and want to do this documentary. So to my right, here he is, Alex
Hi.
Valentine. Welcome to Let Them Talk. And so you are a documentary producer.
Okay, let me just talk about myself. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Paul, for having me here tonight. And first of all, I would consider myself more like an investigative journalist. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, we started our company, Nestor Production, let's say about 2 years ago, as a bunch of freelance paparazzo, I would say. Uh-huh. The guys who went all over the world, made some beautiful pictures, sometimes horrible pictures of wars and war zones, etc., etc., etc. So, and then we come together and we think about the stories, which probably every one of us has at that time. So, and I said, well, why not to recall how started, for instance, even before the Cold War, even before the Second World War, how started the entire idea of American military aid to the Soviet Union. And, well, basically, the entire war machine of the Soviet Union was created with intensive help of the West, and specifically of the United States. And we tried to find out who was at the beginning of these stories,
sure,
and how it happened exactly. So, and we were able to figure out that one of the beautiful and amazing historical figures was John Walter Christie. And right now we are working on a project which we named Version Christie, which has nothing to do with the Governor Christie. Christie has nothing to do with him, nothing political. But I would love to. I would love to make an interview with this guy.
Okay.
Because it's probably his relative, distant.
Well, he's from New Jersey, right?
Yes, he was born in Hoboken and around.
Hoboken.
Yes, and he spent his entire life in New Jersey working on his tanks. So essentially, John Walter Christie was a genius. He was the same caliber of genius as Thomas Alva Edison, probably. Because the guy created the entire modern conception of tanks. First of all, it's a suspension, Christie, which is now used most widely all around the world, in every tank, almost every tank
to this day
in the world these days. Then he created the idea of how to put all stuff together inside the tank, how to put transmission and the engine at the same place, which eliminates the need to transfer power all over the tank. Means the tank could be more compact, etc., etc., etc.
Wow.
So very interesting.
Okay, a tank. Let's now. So we're talking about John Walter Christie. Okay, from New Jersey.
Yeah, he was of Scottish, Irish, British descent.
And he worked on a suspension system adapted for use in tanks prior to World War II.
Much, much earlier than that. He started these works at the end of 20s, of the 20th century.
Now, let's just, as a matter of background, explain what is a tank, what's it used for, and why is it important? And briefly, just in a short time, what if for people who don't know
it's
what
a very
tank
briefly.
is? Yeah.
It happened at the First World War that when France stabilized and they were practically impenetrable. There was no way to break through the fronts, and that's why the entire World War I was fought on the very same space, a very limited space. Nobody moves, back, forwards, whatsoever. So, and then generals decided that they need a specific tool to break through the line of defense, to support the infantry, which goes through this stuff, through this breakthrough. And that's how the entire conception of the tank, the original conception, was conceived. So the first tank happened in, as far as I remember, 1916, and they were totally unbelievably heavy or practically useless.
Okay.
So the
They were
idea,
prototypes, basically.
the prototypes, basically. The idea had to be developed in a way how to put first very powerful weapon inside this moving platform, and the second how to protect this moving platform and their crew.
Right.
Okay? And there was a third point, speed. How to make it fast. And every one of these components
Sure.
were used by John Walter Christie. He combined all of them. And he created the almost amazing, ideal tank for his time, for the mid-20s.
Okay, so now the real interesting point of this very interesting story comes because here is a Irish-Scottish immigrant working in New Jersey, deciding that he's going to design the perfect tank. How did that design wind up in the Soviet Union, and what importance did it have when it wound up there?
Oh, that's an amazing story. Basically, at that time, the Russians had no diplomatic relations to the United States whatsoever. But since 1920, they had the trade company named Amtorg, which resides on Broadway, next to the City Hall right now.
Okay.
I mean,
Is it still there?
No,
just the building
they just liquidated this company in the mid-30s.
Okay.
And they used this company as a, I would say, as a bridgehead in the United States to collect, first of all, to collect the technical information, to collect very valuable information about the progress in science and techniques and whatsoever. Then it was the channel, the back channel, to pay for Communist Party activity and for some election companies in New Jersey, for instance. So, whatever.
Well, if the mafia can do it, why can't
It's nothing to do with the mafia. It's a military intelligence, actually.
Oh, nothing to do with the mafia.
It was the cover over the military intelligence, over the Russian military intelligence at that time. So
today we would call this, would we call this commercial espionage? I mean,
sort of, because yeah, I would name it commercial espionage. But at that time, it was truly connected to the ideology, to the dissemination of communism all around the world, and the idea of communist international. And it was the third international, actually.
Right. So it was here the main focus was to help the Communist Party USA.
Exactly. But the way to please communists in Russia, that they bring back their some inventions, some ideas.
I see.
Some examples of the good stuff, and that's how Amtorg worked.
Okay.
And basically, they, in 1930, in the year 1930, in Russia, they created the basic conception of military use of tanks.
Okay.
And then they started to shop around. What could be the basic model based on which they will create and develop the entire idea? So they went to Germany, they went to France, they went to United Kingdom. So Germany, they didn't have anything because of Versailles Treaty.
Oh,
Versailles Treaty forbade
Versailles. We would say we call it Versailles Treaty. Yeah.
Versailles Treaty forbade Germany from building tanks or military equipment in any sense.
All right.
So then they came to the United Kingdom. There was a couple of conceptions, but not satisfying enough. And finally, they came to Christie, here to New Jersey.
Right. Now he didn't have a sign on the door saying tank design and manufacture.
Oh, not at all.
He was doing something else with this technology.
Of course. He was doing many things, basically. He started as a racing driver. In the beginning of 20th century, in 1909, he was the very first American who participated in Tour de France.
Okay. So he knew motors and engines and
absolutely the motors, engines, and again the composition of the car, which was revolutionary at that time. Totally independent suspension, for instance, in a car.
Okay.
So, and then happened some accident, and I would say that the roads in New Jersey, highways in New Jersey, were even worse than now.
Yeah.
And he was badly hurt in an accident, and when he was at the hospital, he started to think about something else, not about the cars. So he thought about possibility to create first the moving factor, the tractors for moving artillery, for moving guns. And the second, he told himself, maybe I can use the same conception to build something together as a block, encapsulated.
Sure.
So, and that's how the idea of tank came. And he was pretty well known because when the Russian delegation came to the United States at the end of early 20s of the 20th century, they knew where to find him. First, they came to Cooper's Union College, where Christie, 20 years before, he used to study.
I see. Oh, so he studied at Cooper.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He used to study
John
at
Walter
Cooper.
Christie. Okay.
So then probably they were recommended directly to him. They stopped by. He showed them the pilot models and explained how they could be developed.
Okay.
At that time, the American Army tested all these tanks as well. And I have in my possession even diaries and letters from that time Major George Patton, who was in charge of the special committee which tested all these tanks.
Sure.
And he said, it's amazing, it's the best. It's the best what could be used for American Army. But unfortunately, John Walter Christie had a very bad character. He was a character, I would say.
So this guy is like, this is a great movie, right? So you're thinking about
absolutely.
This should be presented as a movie about this colorful character.
Exactly.
And so this is a fascinating story. And so we're at the point now where the Soviet Union, through their operatives in New York, have discovered this Cooper Union graduate who is making tanks in New Jersey. And the tank has been tested by the U.S. Army. Major George Patton, the famous tank commander later on in the Second World War,
the future general,
said this is the best suspension and best tank idea that anybody's come up with.
Yep.
But America didn't get that, right? They didn't get
America
that tank.
didn't get it because they weren't able to understand the conception of the tanks. Only only Patton understood it at that time.
Basically, an independent suspension sort of thing instead
Sort of.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I brought the materials here. I can show how it.
Right, but it's fine. We can discuss it because I think folks have seen it. The older tanks were very stiff, like tractors, and just moved. But the newer tanks, and you can see them today.
Every one of them, they're
wheels.
Separately.
Every wheel within
every wheel has a cylinder.
Okay.
With hydraulics inside.
Hydraulics, yeah.
Hydraulics inside, and a spring inside. And it moves back and forth, and every wheel moves separately.
Right. Okay, and then that tank can go faster now.
Faster, much faster. For instance, the Christie prototype M1931 tank, it has about 90 miles per hour.
Wow, 1931.
On a highway.
And considering when you see the old prototypes from World War I, they were like chugging away at 1 mile and 2 miles an hour. People could walk faster than them. So that was quite a leap. But the United States rejected it.
United States rejected it.
Why? It was too revolutionary. They didn't understand it.
Too revolutionary, and they didn't see the field, how to use it.
Okay.
There was no strategy ideas for
to go with it.
To use it.
So,
and the Christie sold 2 actual tanks to Russians.
Wow.
Okay, and only because
from New Jersey they were loaded on a freighter and taken to Russia.
Exactly. But the funny part is that because Russia and USSR at that time, they had no diplomatic relations with the United States. They had to buy these tanks as agricultural tractors. I've seen the documents myself. I mean, in Aberdeen.
You know the old story of when John Brown was taking rifles into Kansas?
Exactly.
They were labeled Bibles.
Yes, sir. That's the very same story.
They're all rifle Bibles, right?
And I know
tractors.
I know who signed it.
Okay. Who signed it? Tell us. Is that a secret or for the movie?
I will keep it till the documentary.
All right, when the documentary comes out. See, that's why we have to produce this documentary. Great idea for a documentary.
Oh, absolutely.
Alex Valentine, how can people? Is there a place people can get in touch with you if they're really interested in this heavy history?
Just go to to our website, nestorproduction.com.
Nestorproductions.com. Nestor.
Nestor. Nestor.
Tor. Right.
Production.
Right. Production.com.
Production.com. Production.
NestorProduction.com.
Yes, that's one word.
Nestor.
And there are contact number, and there's an email.
Sure.
You can just contact me. I would.
That's right on that web page, right?
Yeah, this is a web page. There is some project we have.
Great.
There are some ideas we have. There is even we place there even short script.
Right. So NestorProduction.com. Good.
Yes.
All right, good. So, So now we're at this. So the Soviet Union has grabbed 2 tractors, and the idea that comes with them. The U.S. Army has rejected it, and now the Nazi government of Germany gets into the picture.
Oh yeah, Nazi government of Germany at that time, they were not Nazis because it was 1930.
Okay.
Hitler was not in power, and Germans came almost at the same time to the United States asking for permission to buy other variants of Christie tanks. Guess what? Permission was denied.
Right, because they had relations with the U.S., so they had to go through the channels.
Absolutely.
Right.
They had a diplomatic relation. They were able to go through official channels, and they didn't succeed.
They didn't even know the Russians were buying these other tanks.
I'm afraid they did.
Then why didn't they prevent it then? They just didn't get the idea that it was important.
I have no idea.
Until the Germans got involved, then they were worried.
Basically, German probably think that they will be able to exchange these ideas with Russians using other channels, not through the United States. But through so-called back channels, the Rapallo.
Oh, I see. They could purchase the idea from Russia.
Russians. Right. But they didn't do it. Never
okay.
happened.
And the result is, so let's fast forward, 1941, enemy at the gates.
Okay.
The German army sweeps across Ukraine and
All
Belarus and Western Russia, gets to the gates of Moscow, Leningrad,
And
gates
what
of
they
Stalingrad.
had at the beginning. Guess what? They had about 3,000 tanks.
Who had which side?
Germans.
Germans had
Germans.
3,000. So they came in with a mighty
Well,
tank force.
essentially 3,800, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Russians at that time concentrated in 1941 at their borders the best tanks in the world, an amount of 23,000.
Wow.
Wonderful. Out of these 23,000, about 2,000 were the best of the best of the best.
Okay.
KV first and T-34.
Okay.
The very best tank in the world at that time, T-34.
And that's based
on Christie design.
Right.
All others were as well.
And the
perfect.
Germans had the infamous Panzer tanks. Those.
PZ first.
Okay.
PZ 2,
Right.
PZ 3, and PZ 4,
Right.
which were targets.
Targets. They're just sitting
Very
ducks.
good
We
targets.
say sitting ducks. Sitting ducks.
Sitting ducks.
Right. For the much faster moving
Absolutely.
and with a large gun
Absolutely.
and very fast. So the mighty German military, right, is coming across trying to defeat the Soviet Union, crush the Soviet dream
Yes.
and ideal, and they meet Russian tanks that are built on the design provided by an American engineer
Exactly.
named John Walter Christie and designed
Yes.
in the United States in a factory in New Jersey.
And they were built on factories which were built and designed by American companies. Essentially
In Russia.
In
the
Russia.
Soviet Union.
And essentially, the entire Russian military production plants were designed by American companies.
They came in and showed them how to do it.
Exactly.
Right.
All the production. And at the end of the 20th century, there are only two plants on the face of the earth where tanks are produced on a conveyor. Every hour there is a tank coming out of conveyor. Guess what? One of this plant is in Nizhny Tagil in Ural Mountains, and another is in Chelyabinsk.
They're
Both are in Russia.
Both are in Russia.
Yes.
So you're saying to this day, under the Putin government, Russia is churning out high-tech tanks based on the model of...
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Right. And now,
the conception is, of course, developed, widely developed.
yeah.
But essentially, that's the very same design. Yeah.
Now, what did the U.S. had? What did Patton drove his own tank? What was that? It was smaller and faster.
Abrams.
And the one back in World War II.
The World War II was a Sherman.
A Sherman tank, right?
It's amazing.
That was the American competitor to the T-34, the Russian tank, based on the American design.
But basically,
But the American tank wasn't as good.
Oh no! Please, I wouldn't use it. Technically, they had
The famous Sherman tank.
5 engines inside one compartment.
5 engines.
5 engines.
Instead of one
Inside
diesel
of
engine.
One diesel, 5 gasoline engines.
Right.
Nobody knew how it will work together. I have not enough imagination to imagine how to do it.
Now, what is that? What a tank? This is interesting. Now, so we got, and also to bring out the point, I think it's important to notice that right now, what is the most recent Russian tank? Is the
T-90.
T-90, which is a design direct.
That's the
descendant.
same line.
Direct descendant, right?
Straight the same line.
Right.
But of course, it's extremely interesting tank. That they had stabilizers, they had gyroscopes, they had specific way to protect tanks at all from anti-tank rockets and
right, more high-tech technology in it. And
it's amazing
sloped
technology.
armor and all this kind of thing. Is a tank? I mean, in the nuclear world, really, are all these things, aircraft carriers, tanks, all this? They're basically
technically,
make work.
technically, you know what, Paul? In 1956, I guess, the famous Russian general Marshal Zhukov,
Zhukov, who led the Soviet armies in World War II.
Yes, he tested the idea of breaking through the line of defense using tactical nuclear weapon, and he succeeded.
In a game.
In a testing ground, of course.
To use tactical nuclear weapons to blow a hole and then follow through with tanks.
And then follow using the tanks.
Right.
That's
I hope that never happens.
Oh, of course.
That would be very destructive.
Of course.
Alex Valentine, great, interesting story. That's a fact. I think we pretty much told. So, let's think. Can we talk about what it would be like in World War II or any war to be in a tank? What was that like? What was a tank battle like for the crew inside the tank? I mean, were they like in the background and in the rear, and somebody said attack, and they just drove in the right direction, shooting all the way, or what did they do?
Essentially, there were different variants of tactics, of tank tactics. The first one were a series heavy tanks, which were supposed to break through line of defense and destroy this line of defense. The second variant were the second breed of tanks, I would say. They were used to support the infantry, which had to be covered.
Okay.
And that's middle tanks. And the third are very light tanks. They are more like light nomads at the time of Genghis Khan.
Okay, moving fast.
Moving very fast.
Okay.
Going through everything.
Wow.
And
1 minute to go. What is the life expectancy of a World War II tank operator in the heat of battle?
12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yes.
All right. So it was a suicide mission.
Absolutely, but somebody got luck.
Right, and it would be just the one or two that survived at the end, and which side was the one they were on.
Yes.
Right.
But usually there were much more chances to survive inside the Soviet tank than inside the German.
Okay, Alex Valentine, go to nestorproduction.com to learn more about John Walter Christie and how the United States built the great tank army of the Soviet Union, now of Russia, and how their tanks were better than ours, at least in World War II. Very interesting story, Alex Valentine. Heavy history here on Let Them Talk, and we'll see you next week. I have some entertainment next week. It'll be very nice. So thanks a lot for joining us, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Paul.
All right, good.
Thank you.